Supposed to turn your microphone on. Maybe.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Administration, Finance, Recreation and Parks, Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for April 9, 2019. The purpose of the committee meetings are for the city departments to pass along information to the city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of the city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance mandates the city administrator as the chair of the committee meetings. By ordinance, the committee makes no formal decision on committee matters. Rather, items are voted to move to a mayor and council meeting for consideration and vote. Or staff receives guidance from the committee regarding the matter. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during the committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings held at 7 p.m. in the city council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month. The first item on today's agenda, and we are going to do public safety and public works first. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for March 12th, 2019. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion to approve and seconded by, motion to approve by Councilmember Judy, second by Councilmember Tizer. Any questions or comments? All in favor, raise your hands. Thank you. Next item on the agenda. What did I say on that one? Okay. Next item on the agenda, public safety, fire, no items. Public safety, police. Consideration to accept a canine vest donation from Vest NPDP Incorporated. Deputy Chief Rivard.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm presenting the canine vest donation from Vest. Is it not on?
This is the bottom one.
Go. I'm green now. We good? Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present the canine vest donation for Vest NPDP. This is a not-for-profit organization that's been operating since 2001 and providing protective vests for canines all across the country. Each protective vest is valued around $1,100. We are looking to outfit 3 of our canines, so the value of the donation would be $3,300. At zero cost to the city of Roswell.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion approved by Councilmember Palermo, seconded by the mayor. Any further discussion? Questions? All in favor say aye. Raise your hands. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Lucky dog.
Next item, Public Works. Consideration for the mayor and or city administrator to sign a change order to contract with site engineering for the Norcross Culvert Replacement Project in an amount not to exceed $118,119.95 for additional work items. Mr. Skulski.
It's actually going to be Ms. Izo tonight, so I'm going to
Ms. Izo?
turn it over to Sharon and let her go through this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's an opportunity for us to give you an update on the Norcross Culvert project, and we're also going to be requesting some additional funding for that project due to some construction difficulties we encountered. Just as a reminder, the Norcross Culvert project, we have a contract with site engineering in the amount of $182,286. We had some owner-directed work in our initial request of $25,000, and the total funding that was approved was $286. We began work on February 4th and had a road closure that ran between March 13th and March 27th. And here is picture of the road closure that we had, the detour plan. What basically happened was the contractor submitted their detour plan to transportation for review, and transportation had some concerns about what was planned by the contractor. Transportation asked for an extended look at this detour plan. For instance, they wanted to have 2 detour routes, one for commuters, one for truck traffic, and they also were interested in 6 variable message boards, which run about $3,000 a piece for that 2-week time period. That resulted in some additional cost of $23,750. The good news is we had 0 complaints, and the 14-day road closure was adequate for us to complete the project, so we didn't have to extend that at all. The next thing is we had some unsuitable soils on the project. As we got started underway on the city side of the project, we encountered some unsuitable materials. It appeared that there was a lot of trash that we discovered. There was a number of tires that were discovered. Here's some bedding and a mattress. Here's some concrete that we pulled out of there. And then we had a number of tree trunks and that kind of thing, organics that we had to pull out of there, which resulted in basically material that we couldn't use to backfill the project. We had hoped as we got closer to the roadbed that we'd experience better material, but that was not exactly the case. Here you can see in this picture here at the top, this is the first day of our road closure, that first Wednesday. And as we got closer, we had a very significant sinkhole that developed right there. And basically you can tell that these materials were contributing to the sinkhole that we were experiencing around the culvert and that were undermining that roadway. So that evening, we actually worked till about 11:30 at night, which is that other picture you see there, basically providing trench stability. We had to bring some different trench boxes in and some different material to backfill along there. I'm going to show you a video right here. Before I show, I just want to explain what was going on. So they basically had just placed this piece of pipe that you see, and then they were putting that trench box in to move forward down the trench and to place the next piece of pipe. As they were moving that trench box and trying to get it situated, we experienced a cave-in here, which will show you how difficult these materials were to work with. And as the cave-in happens, it actually moves that pipe, so that entire area had to be re-excavated, the pipe had to be relayed, and then we had to work on from there. So it was really tough going for the contractor. I think it paused. It's only about 30 seconds. It's almost in slow-mo. Oh, it keeps hanging up at the exact same place. I'm sorry.
There it is.
Oh, there you go. So it caves in, it moves the pipe. All right, that basically resulted in a little over $84,000 of additional material. We had to haul off that material and bring in new. And these prices, we had an opportunity to compare those to the prices that we have with our on-call contractors and to the market in general. We were very satisfied that the contractor gave us very competitive pricing on that. Lastly, we had some utility conflicts out there, which is fairly typical whenever we get into one of these kinds of construction projects. The one here on the lower left, this is a sanitary line that we encountered. We knew it was there. We had been told it was ductile iron. When we got to it, it was terracotta, and terracotta was encased in a concrete sleeve, and it's very, very fragile. It couldn't support itself under its own weight, so we had to cut that piece out and replace it with ductile. And then this one up here on the right actually wasn't a utility conflict until actually we were already underway with our project. That's a fiber that was put in by AT&T. Their utility contractor actually came through once we were underway there in front of Variant, and when they came through, they shot it underground with a torpedo, and we've talked about that before, how that can create some difficulties. This one actually was shot through the fire suppression line for Variant, which caused them some difficulties and some problems there at their site. And you can see it actually came through lower than it should have because it created a conflict with our culvert, where you can see that's the existing culvert. And where we had planned our new culvert, we actually had to drop it below that fiber line. So that was another $10,000 there. So in all, we had expected or put aside $25,000 for this kind of thing. It resulted, the actual situation is $118,000. So we're going to be requesting additional funding of $93,075, and that is funding that's available out of the Stormwater Fund. Answer any questions.
Floor is open.
Okay, so that's different than what's written here.
The not to exceed.
It's a not to exceed, I think. What are you recommending we move forward with the 93,075?
What is the not to exceed?
It's,
This one, the 118. It's this
Yeah.
number. Yes, we are recommending that.
The what, the 118?
The 118, that would be for the actual contract for, that number's right. Oh, I'm sorry. So it's the $25,000 in owner-directed work plus the $93,775. Thank you, Lydia. She's all over it. And that would be the change order to their contract. Sorry.
So I'd like to give props to you all for a very good job on a very hard situation. Obviously, when you're pulling mattresses and tires out of from under a road, it could have been a very bad situation. And the fact that you had a business that relied on traffic right there, and you promised them 14 days, you got it done in 14 days, was spectacular on a very busy road, and also with the traffic detours and stuff. So stuff happens. I think Mary Henry said in our meeting, this is like going to the dentist for a root canal. You need a crown, and we need to do this. So motion to approve the extra funding.
Motion approved by Councilmember Judy,
Second.
second by Councilmember Tizer. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor say aye. Raise your hands. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we need to take a 30-second. Okay. When you get a chance, Olivia, can you bring up 9 Oxbow on the map, like Google Maps? Street view. Going to approval of minutes of the Administration, Finance, and Recreation and Parks Committee meeting for March 12th, 2019. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Motion approved by Councilmember Tizer,
Second.
second by Councilmember Judy. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Thank you. Under Administration, item number 2, discussion of process for City Council initiatives. This was added by Councilmember Wilsey, who is requesting this be deferred, so we'll defer this indefinitely. Item number 3, we're also deferring this. Do you want to give some background, Michael?
Yes, sir, I'm glad to give you a little bit. There's the CDBG allocation that North Fulton Community Charities is not going to be able to complete a project. So we're asking to reallocate those funds, but we've actually found another project that may be a really good place to reallocate those funds, but we don't have all the details yet, so we're just not ready to bring this back. So we'll bring it back at the first available meeting that we have it ready to come back to you.
So we're going to defer that indefinitely right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we'll move on to item number 4, discussion regarding day laborers located at 1023 Alpharetta Street, also known as Southern Skillet. This is actually where they're at 9 Oxbow Road, which Libby's going to bring up right now. And I can give you a little background, and I know you all received my email about this, but when we sold the Skillet property, or started to develop the Skillet property and market it, we needed to move that group off-site. So we had a couple options. The city has traditionally permitted this activity to occur on that site. We could criminally trespass them, or we could try to find a solution, a temporary solution. And we worked as a team on this and looked at some of the available properties that would be suitable for this activity, and not encroach too much on what we have going on in our areas. We looked at 9 Oxbow Road, which the city owns, and we'll be demolishing this July, August. Well, the notice to proceed will go out July, August. And by that time, we'll have either resolved this, we'll have this resolved in some fashion. But this was the best solution we could come up with temporarily. So we Chief Police went out and talked to them. and requested they move to this site. We put a sign up out there, we put a porta-john on the side, it's covered. So this was our temporary solution for this problem. And I will answer whatever questions you have.
So I guess my first question is regarding, so you said the city has always permitted it. The way it appeared to me was historically the Southern Skillet property, when it was privately owned, was used for that purpose, and it was private property. The city purchased the Southern Skillet property, but did not control it in the sense it was leased by the DDA, and it was up to the DDA if they wanted to if they wanted to continue supporting that site being used for that purpose. And it sounds like now it's gotten to the point where they do not. So I understand that part, but from my understanding, there's never been a time where it's been specifically allowed on public property, and even so much to the point of having a sign specifically stating that it's supported on public property and having a porta-john and encouraging it. So I think to me that does sound like it is something different than we've historically seen, but I'm certainly open to hearing if that's not the case and if I'm misunderstanding any parts of the history.
I don't know if anybody
Would
here
you
has
like
this
me to
one.
give you the history? Okay, so this problem goes back at least 25 years that I know of. And the Great Recession took care of part of it because there was just no work, and it really cut down on the day laborers that were congregating at Fraser Street and Highway 9. There were some issues on Fraser Street, and then they started locating on private property, which was the El Poco Loco, now I sound like Jerry Wood. It's the video store that was at the corner. Now it's the apothecary and the dentist right there. So they allowed it, and the police officers would tell them to move along as long as they were walking down Fraser Street or Highway 9. That was permissible, but to stand and congregate, they had to be on private property with the property owner's permission. Then Coro Realty bought the Southern Skillet site, and the day laborers started congregating there. Bill Bartlett was the principal at Coro. Bill Bartlett said he didn't care if they congregated there or not. He was just buying out leases, and they weren't planning on doing anything. So also then in the meantime, former council member Ed Tate had started a nonprofit, and he came to the city with this nonprofit idea, and it was basically, it was a kind of a job thing. There was a police officer on the site. They had folks manning the station, and then they would match up the day laborers with the contractors. And where they were mostly coming from was the fact that contractors were taking advantage of the day laborers. And they would come and pick them up and offer them $20 an hour, and when they dropped them off, they'd give them $5. So what this required through this nonprofit, and the city gave them a grant, I believe it was $21,000 for a year, and they had no business. No one would go there. The contractors wouldn't use it. The day laborers wouldn't use it. It was, my impression was it was a little bit too much of a government function, that there wasn't a level of trust. So from what I have gathered over the years is that, you know, there has been, like I said, the Great Recession took care of a lot of it, but now the construction is booming again and the economy's up. I think that there has been a rebound, but historically they've been allowed to be locate on the Southern Skillet property. So we also had an ordinance in place at one time that, and Mr. Halsey can tell me if that's still valid, but there was an ordinance in place that stated that it was against the law to hire a day laborer on private property.
Right. It actually says that it's against the law unless the property owner gives permission.
Right, and that was hence the whole deal with Acapulco Video and the dentist there, they didn't mind. Coro Realty didn't mind with the Southern Skillet. So in my mind, our policy that we've had in place over the years has been, you can do this on private property with the property owner's permission. So, and this is where we are now, because what happened with the Skillet property is we're trying to market that, or I should say S.J. Collins is trying to market it, and they were having difficulty because of the day laborers. I can tell you, I drove up here yesterday and parked over in Chippers, and I was stormed by folks that were looking for work. So fast forward to now, and we've got a day labor camp that is sanctioned by the city. And, you know, what do we do with that? You know, I will point out that this was a staff initiative. I personally feel like it's a policy decision, but now that we've gone this far, how do we take care of it from here?
So I'd say I feel this was definitely a policy decision. It was something definitely new. So again, the history and the situation is absolutely, if the owner of private property wants to allow it and support it, that's their right. And never have we seen public property used for this purpose. And I do have concern that a policy decision was made not at a public meeting. So that's something that should have been come here. If that's staff's recommendation, that can certainly be staff's recommendation. But my biggest issue is the fact that this should have came to a meeting. This should have had the public being aware, instead of just people driving by, seeing a sign up, seeing a porta john, and seeing just really a new location here on Highway 9. And so I guess what I heard from Mr. Palmer too, I heard, you know, in the thought process, it sounded to me like there were two options being considered. It sounded to me like there was one was finding a publicly owned property to put up a sign and state it and show as their location, and it sounded to me like I heard saying just issuing trespass warnings.
We went over all options, and those were really the only two viable options we came up with.
Well, I guess what I'd say is my preference is I certainly don't want to see anybody getting arrested or anything like that. So that's where I have concern and issue with hearing about the trespass type option. At the same time, I'm not comfortable with having this on city property right now. I think it's something that can certainly be explored and discussed, but I think we really need input from the community and really seeing how the community feels and what they feel is the best place. If the community does decide that this is something that they absolutely want to have in Roswell, I think there needs to be a discussion of all the possible locations and really a lot more input. But I'm not comfortable with what's occurred.
I'm not sure I understand your issue.
Okay.
Is the issue that you believe staff made a bad decision, or is your issue that you don't like day laborers? Or something else?
Okay, so my number one issue is that staff made a policy decision when the decision should have been a recommendation coming to council for public input. So that's number one. That's my biggest issue. What I see is the discussion point, and I guess what I don't like is a decision was made. A decision was made that for the first time, from the sound of it, unless for the first time from what I'm hearing, at a public location, the city is offering up and creating this use. That's something that I have concern with as well. It's something I'm certainly open to considering and discussing, but I'd want to learn more. I'd want to see what are other cities doing. You know, what is Alpharetta doing? What is Milton doing? How are other areas handling this? And I'm not comfortable and ready with the fact that just a decision was made, this has occurred. So does that answer your question?
Not really.
So what is your specific question?
Well, we have an issue. There's a temporary solution. Is there a different temporary solution?
So do you see this, as is this the ideal situation for you?
It's not, to me, it's not my decision to decide what's the ideal situation, but is there another temporary solution? Because what I'm hearing is this is a temporary solution that came up because of a need that happened kind of in real time. So is there another temporary solution? If there is, then the temporary solution is no longer the temporary solution. There's another one. So I guess what I'm asking you is, what do you want to do?
So another temporary solution is we let them know that it's temporary, ending this certain date that's in the very near future. We remove the porta-john, we take down the sign, and we let them know that this is something that's not available on this public property right here. That is another temporary option.
They know that.
And your problem with the porta-john is exactly what?
So I guess I'm confused. So help me understand, what do you see as the benefit and the great reason to have a porta-john there? Help me understand that.
May I address that?
Please.
That's trying to prevent the crime of public exposure. If you don't have a facility that's available and you've got the public road on two sides going there, then you're going to have people complaining about them exposing themselves as they relieve themselves.
Well, that would be, I would hope none of them would be breaking the law and doing that. So.
If you've got people and they don't have anywhere to go, they're going to go. And so it's better for the city to have a porta-john there than it is to leave it where they're causing further disruption to the public, in my opinion. And I think that's how the police chief saw it.
I feel unless there's an opportunity for community input where they say, the community says they absolutely want this publicly owned site to be to be used for this purpose, I don't feel comfortable supporting it. I'd prefer that as it's been done historically, it's on someone's private property, and that is absolutely their right to have it. So I think we might have some disagreement here, and I wanted to just to share that and express that.
I'll clarify a little bit. If we don't have a policy in place, and I've got a situation, or we have a situation that we need to act in order to, in the best interest of the city, that's my role. And until there is a policy in place, I'm going to do the things I need to do to make sure that we're, protecting our interests.
So I think what I had heard as the mayor kind of laid out part of the history, if S.J. Collins and the DDA have come to you and with the police chief or whoever it was and said this is something they can't support on that property, then without a doubt that's operational. That needs to be addressed, and that was addressed. To put up a sign, to rent a porta-john, that is something.
There's not a sign out there. There's a sign that is letting the individuals know that's where they're permitted to congregate. You can't even read that sign from the street.
Okay.
So it's not a sign in the sense of a advertisement. And by the way, the Skillet property is public property. It's leased to the DDA, but the city owns it. So that's public property. So we have a precedent. We needed to act. This was a temporary solution we came up with as a team, my direction, and this is where we're at.
Okay. And I hear that, and I think there's always going to be times where there's different points of view, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's more reason why these discussions should be in public, and I feel not made behind the scenes. So with that, I'll make a motion. What I feel is what we should be doing, which is I motion that we take down this sign, we remove this porta potty on Friday, and we let them know on Wednesday the 10th, just that this will be the location for 3 more days, but this is not something that will be ongoing. And I think this should be a continued discussion that we can have at a work session at a committee to see what does the community want to see around day labor. Should there be a public place, whether temporarily or permanently?
So are we motioning to overturn the staff's decision? I mean, I don't really understand what we're trying to do here. I mean, you got motion this to take it to council and then have a vote at council?
Sure, if that's,
I mean, I don't know that's what I'm trying to figure out here. I think the better solution here is, if you're concerned, let's come up with a solution. But I mean, I mean, motioning to overturn a staff decision when it's under his purview, I think, is not a good precedent to set.
Wouldn't a better solution to this be to direct staff to come up with a better solution?
my concern is the time. So I always encourage staff to come with recommendations, but what I don't want is I don't want the can to be kicked down the road and this to be a solution for many more months because staff decided that they felt this was the best possible solution, which is what they said.
Mr. Holdsey, how long has this been going on?
To my knowledge, this started back in the early 90s.
So time, I mean, so we're trying to figure out something. We all understand there's an issue here. We all understand it's temporary. I think usurping city administrator's power and what he's supposed to do in his job is a bad precedent, and I'm not going to support that.
Well, for me, let me just say this, that when we first started having the conversations on Friday, but this has only been going on since Friday, I was told by staff that this was a temporary solution and that when we demolished the structure, we would find a permanent solution. That to me is setting policy, which we do not need to go down that road. I will also say this, that this temporary solution is compounding on itself. The number of folks that are there are growing exponentially. There are a lot of folks there. I think this is, and I could be wrong, I couldn't get close enough to the trucks to read their license plates, but this parking lot to the right yesterday was more than half full with vans and trucks, and there were probably 30 to 40 day laborers there. I think it's becoming a regional draw because it is we have condoned it at this location. So my only request would be that if everyone agrees that this could spiral out of control or that there could be a further issue with this that we need to revisit, that we give staff that direction, that we don't see this type of a situation as a permanent solution, but we understand the humanity of it being a temporary solution and time is of the essence.
Completely agree with that. I think this is a police, humanitarian, and legal issue. And I think all those need to be taken into consideration, and I definitely think this is a very temporary situation that we need to address quickly further.
Now, isn't there the concern, or I'll say a concern I have is it is setting expectations. So my preference is, if we're going to communicate it here, there's a specific date that's communicated, because if it is turning into a regional draw, because it's my understanding, I know there's one in South Forsyth County, which is where a lot of the Alpharetta people go. I'm not sure where the Milton people go. Johns Creek, I'd be curious to hear. They might have one. It might be on public property. It might be on private property. I have no idea. But if this is going to continue to grow, and the expectations will be set that Roswell is providing public property for this purpose, that's where I have a bigger concern on how do we make a change potentially when this building does get torn down. If instead we had it made clear and it was documented here that this is temporary until this date, I think that would be setting better expectations for everybody. But it doesn't sound like there's any support for that.
Fine, but how do you come up with a date? I mean, this is a very complex issue. I mean, I think that we just say staff needs to work this out as quickly as possible and come back to us with a solution. I just don't know how to put a date on this.
Well, I think the notice to proceed to move on this project, where they're gonna start the demo, we're talking July. So, April, May, June. And we're gonna continue to work it. And we'll continue to try to see if we can find a solution. And the solution may be, there isn't one, they just have to leave. And that's fine.
Could be a church, could be all sorts of options.
We'll do some outreach on their behalf and see what we can find for them, but that's all we can do. I mean, this is just the best of a bad situation we have right now. Any further discussion? Questions? Okay, we'll move on to finance. Item number 5, presentation of the fiscal year 2019 third quarter budget initiative progress report. Mr. Luckett.
Good evening, everyone. So this is our third quarter budget initiative progress report. As you might remember, this is our first year where we're reporting to you all on a quarterly basis as to the status of all the different initiatives and projects that you approved as part of the annual budget. Just to give you a brief overview, there's 80 projects included in this report. Of those 80 projects, 21 or 26% of those are complete. 46 or 58% of those are progressing as planned. There are 9 projects that are experiencing some type of delay. That represents about 11% of the total projects. And that's my summary. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those for you.
A lot of pages to turn that into a paragraph, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well done.
I can go through each one if you'd like.
I'll read these later.
That it?
That's it.
Thanks, Ryan. Item number 6, consideration of a resolution for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a supplemental lease with the Georgia Municipal Association for a new fire truck with an annual payment of $140,719.21.
So the FY 2018 budget included approval from the mayor and council for the fire department to purchase a heavy rescue truck. Those trucks are custom built and they take about a year from ordering, so we're just not getting around to the truck being delivered. This item is to take care of the actual purchasing of the truck. This is how we've handled most big purchases like this with fire trucks in the past 5 years or so. So this is recommending an additional supplemental lease with the Georgia Municipal Association. We will lease this truck for a period of 10 years with an interest rate of 3.41%, an annual payment of $140,719.
Ryan, which category of debt would this be in?
So this would fall within our capital leases.
Thank you.
Floor is open.
Motion to approve and move to agenda.
Second.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Tizer, second by Councilmember Judy. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, raise your hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Recreation and Parks, presentation of the economic impact report for the River Parks Master Plan. Mr. Levin.
Mayor and Council, thanks for the time for this item today. This is the economic impact report of our River Parks Master Plan. This initiative and this project was part of our current year budget and was requested by Mayor and Council and the Recreation Commission to review our River Parks Master Plan that was adopted in 2017 and the economic impacts associated with that. I'm going to go through, we'll have a couple of speakers associated with this item. And I just wanted to do the introductions just to remind everybody, the community, those that are watching, that the city of Roswell has really visioned to be a vibrant riverside community connecting our neighborhoods, preserving our rich history, and celebrating arts, culture, and cultivating the entrepreneurial spirit. And that's the vision that we've set out, and we really see the River Parks Master Plan positioned to support that vision, and the economic impact associated with that really drives home why we continue to focus on this project as our #1 initiatives from the Parks and Recreation Department. Just a brief timeline as we run through that this Parks and River Parks Master Plan has been several decades in the making, visioned back in 2001, and even before that, we've been working on various master plans, identifying this as an initiative. In 2012, it continued to be the #1 priority of our department, and then that brought us to 2016. In 2016, we actually developed the River Parks Master Plan with some extensive community input, a number of community meetings spread throughout the entire city, and really what that visioned was a number of different improvements around the entire river. In 2017, we reinforced that vision with the #1 priority out of our 5-year Parks Master Plan that identified the River Parks Master Plan as the #1 priority of our community. So we've been continuing to build and build and build this initiative, which brings us to the economic impact report of, if we do this project, what can the city expect not only from a community benefit, but also from an economic impact associated with the development of this project. And really the vision of the Parks Master Plan, if you remember, was connecting all of our individual parks along the river under one vision for the riverfront of our city. It was taking Willio Park as a standalone kind of park unit, Azalea, River Landing, Riverside Park, Ace, Sand and Don White, and having a consistent vision that connected all of those pieces together. We've started to implement that vision already with the completion of the boardwalk. And the River Parks Master Plan, as you'll hear from Michael tonight, is about a $36 million investment. And along with that, another $2 million associated with the annual maintenance, or about an $18 million endowment that would be required to maintain that investment if we were to just cast our magic wand and do the investment all at once. It's spread out through Willio, and we'll kind of walk you through starting at Willio and working our way upriver. But that $36 million investment is spread out in a number of different areas. About $264 million just there at Willio Park for some additional site improvements. As you work your further way up into Azalea Park, this is one of the bigger overhauls that we have in that facility. About $5 million of the $36 million on building replacements, hardscape replacements, new picnic structures, new parking lots, and really a way to connect with the river directly, which we are currently missing. Right now we have a lot of old concrete buildings that we house some of our concession operations out of, and it really doesn't connect people with the river. It almost kind of pushes you away from the river into the parking lots in different locations. Also at River Landing, major investment of about $1.5 million to overhaul that facility, which is in dire need of connecting to the river. Right now, that's one of the only locations along the entire river stretch where you can actually rent a facility, have a public meeting, and the building shows its age, frankly. It's a little tired. It's a little worn out. We have great communication with the people that rent it and use it, but as we look at the potential for the River Parks Master Plan and the facilities, we see this building as one of the anchors for continued access, rentals, supporting a number of different activities around our community. So you get to Riverside Park, another $8 million associated with that. The top picture that you'll see is kind of our existing kind of concrete blocks that kind of essentially kind of block everybody in to the parking lot, and you can't really see what's happening in the park and the facility around you. The vision is to really open up that facility so that you see what's happening, that it becomes an active use of our parks and facilities, and really becomes an exciting place to continue the activities that we have down there. As you picture Riverside Sounds down there, and the stage that we have is a beautiful grand stage, but we have issues with rotting of the wood and other things that are happening in that space because it's built so near the river. And so this really becomes the gateway project as you enter the River Parks Master Plan and the river parks themselves, of how are we welcoming people to our community that not only want to invest here but also stay and enjoy the river. As you move further up the river, we've got about $15 million of that $36 million invested in program for the Ace Sand property. This is kind of the most recent acquisition, if you will, is the most recent area where we've got the opportunity to invest in what is currently basically a sand and gravel parking lot. It's the area of the park system where we currently only have a parking lot. It used to be the gravel augmentation, the gravel and sand construction site. And this is the location where we really see the opportunity in the River Parks Master Plan to engage the community and have that rental space that is of such demand. And you'll hear just in a couple of minutes that this portion of the project really positions the city to capture some of that economic impact that we're looking for, and that drives business into our community and continues to have people celebrate not only activities down along the river, but also the opportunity for some key events where we can have ticketed events out on the back lawn. And you'll see right in kind of these areas, and it's a little hard to see on this, but right into this space where we can have some ticketed events here, some more intimate settings, be able to connect not only this portion of the park, but also upriver into Don White Park. And so we're really excited as we look at the different opportunities, not only of the investment into the facilities, but also the economic impact that these start to drive. Don White Park shows about $4 million worth of investment into this space. Again, we've got some old residential properties that we're using. If you've been down to that park, the vision of the master plan discusses removing the volleyball courts and re-envisioning that whole park area. This is the place where we can start to house some more of our concession facilities. This is the put-in location right now for our concession operators. And so we've got an opportunity through this investment to really re-envision not only this park, but how it connects back to Ace Sand, and then how it connects to the rest of the River Park system. Before I go on, is there any questions just on the background and what the master plan has discussed? I'm going to turn it over. Yes, sir.
Just one thing. I know I've struggled for a while trying to understand, what are we doing? Where's the money? Where are the big chunks of investment? What are we actually building? And I think that was very helpful, kind of walk us park by park as to what's happening. What you're going to see, I think, here in a little bit is you'll see that broken down into specifically what's going where, and there's a couple of nice matrices in there that'll help to explain it even more. And I think that for me it was very helpful as we were talking the last few weeks to kind of really get a feel for what we have to do. And I think what Michael will be showing us is, that's the expense, that's the cost, the capital. What do we, what comes out of it? And that then will tie into why you see the endowment number. So.
Yeah, and Michael is here from Redesign Studios. He's been involved in this project for forever. And we also have Walt Ray, who will be just after Michael. And Walt is representing the Trust for Public Land, but also we have this 100-mile vision of the Chattahoochee River and the river program itself. And he's really here just to provide that regional context for what is it that we're doing here locally, and how does that speak to what the region is doing along the Chattahoochee. And then Deborah's going to be our closer and just talk about what the Recreation Commission is working on and our budget recommendations associated with that. So with that, I'm going to switch PowerPoint presentations and turn it over to Michael.
So while he's doing that, what I'm going to do tonight is go through a few case studies first, and then we'll get into some of the specifics of the economic impact analysis that you have in front of you. And it's going to be a sort of a summary of that analysis. I'm not going to go through line by line. We're not going to look at every single number. We're not going to go through all the math that went into this, the economic forecasting models. If you have questions about any of that, we do have the expert here tonight that can answer that. I'm going to introduce my team first, and we have Jen Pendyke with Design Work. Jen is our project architect. Jen has worked with some prestigious architecture firms on award-winning projects all over the country. She now has her own studio here in Avondale Estates, and she's just coming off the completion of a pretty amazing river park project in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they spent about $450 million on a 66-acre river park. So we are extremely lucky and excited to have her experience and creativity on the team. So thank you, Jen, for being here. We also have Jeff Koski of the Blakely Group. Jeff is an economic consultant, and he works with municipalities on these types of issues where you're trying to figure out if you should move forward with a particular project. And like I said, any of the specific questions that you have that may come up about the actual economic analysis, Jeff should be able to answer those tonight. And as the other Jeff mentioned, my name is Michael Kidd. I'm a landscape architect, owner of Root Design Studio. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm going to give you just a brief portion of my background as it relates to Roswell specifically and to this particular project. My career as a landscape architect began right here in Roswell nearly 18 years ago, working on the Riverwalk. That was my first project out of school when I was hired. And my first job was putting together construction documents for phase 1, 2, and 3 of the Riverwalk. Went on to be involved in the design and oversee the construction of the first 3 miles of that trail system. During that same time, I was involved in the development of Riverside Park as well, which is the first park that I was involved with from concept all the way through completion. And since then, I've worked in almost every city-owned property on the river, including in 2014, starting on this master plan process. And I had to double-check the calendar, but it's actually been 5 years now since we started that master plan process. So despite all that, despite 18 years of having to put up with Jeff Pruitt, and I'm still really, really excited to be here to talk about this project, and I think this is an amazing opportunity for the city. We all know Roswell is a great place to be. People love to live here. People love to visit. And a big reason for that is your parks. This is the proof is in the pudding. This achievement in 2017 is just an amazing accomplishment, winning that gold medal award. And then building on that with the completion of phase 4 and 5 of the Riverwalk. This is a great facility that's giving people another reason to come to Roswell and to stay in Roswell. But the master plan has the potential to be sort of a once-in-a-generation transformational project for the city. I want to be real clear right up front that this project is not about park development. As funny as that may seem, we are talking about the development of new and existing parks on the river. But the vision as it was laid out in the master plan is to create an exciting regional amenity that will draw people here, to provide memorable experiences for everybody that visits, to develop a real and meaningful connection between the city and the river, and to showcase the city's stewardship of this critical natural resource. So this project is not really about park development. It's about economic development. That's the framework that I want this whole discussion to be about. So cities and counties all over the country are investing huge amounts of money into their parks. Not athletic fields and ball fields, but these special places that create a sense of community, a sense of belonging, that bring people together. These first-class parks bring in new businesses. They attract an educated and skilled workforce. They increase property values, and they drive economic activity. A simple and obvious example of that is Central Park in New York. Some of the most expensive real estate in the entire city is immediately adjacent to that park. Everybody wants to be on the park. They want to have a park view. They want to be walking distance to the park. And the reason for that is, one, that parks are beautiful places that people like to go. They bring us together. They provide safe opportunities to experience the outdoors. But second, and more importantly, is that every year we're losing more and more of our green space to development. This is something that Frederick Law Olmsted understood over 100 years ago when he designed this park. There were no buildings around Central Park just before 1900. All of the city was concentrated in the southern tip of the island. This was all throwaway marshland. But they recognized that before too long, the city would be overrun with development. If they didn't protect this area's green space and develop it as a park, that they would miss out on this huge opportunity. And I think it'd be hard to argue that this hasn't been a major reason for the city's success. So now we're going to look at a few local examples. This is Tennessee River Park, Chattanooga. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. This park actually extends throughout the county there. The primary focus is in Chattanooga, but it was a joint venture with the county. They spent about $150 million of public and private investment over a 10-year period. And the Chamber of Commerce has estimated that that's generated about $200 million in new private development and nearly $1 billion in new tourism to that county, directly attributable to the development of this park. That's an 8 times return on their initial investment. Another example of a park as economic development, Old Fourth Ward down in Atlanta. The city spent about $25 million building essentially what's a glorified stormwater pond. Ironically, the original proposal for this was nearly $40 million to pipe all this underground and hide it. So in this case, the city had to actually be convinced to spend less money, but on this crazy harebrained idea that you could build a stormwater pond as a park amenity. Well, they did. They took that leap of faith. There were no forecasting models that told them what would happen if they were to do this. There was just a group of passionate stakeholders that believed in this vision. And they built this park. Since its completion, it's generated over $800 million of new economic private development within walking distance of that park. Now, not all of that is directly attributable to the park itself. This is just a few steps away from the Beltline. We all know how much is going on right there. And not all that money, obviously, is going back directly into the city's coffers either. But they had a significant increase in their tax base, not to mention all the jobs that were created, the visitor spending that comes with that. This project has exceeded anybody's wildest expectations. The last case study I'm going to talk about is Falls Park in Greenville, South Carolina. This picture was taken in the 80s, and it shows a highway bridge that goes right through downtown. That bridge was built in 1960, and almost since the day it was built, people were trying to get it removed. You can see this waterfall down here in this photograph, but if you're up here at street level in downtown or driving across that bridge, you would never know this is down here. That area underneath the bridge, like so many other places, was known more for its homeless population, for drugs, for crime. But again, there was a group of passionate, active citizens that wanted to move this bridge and develop this as a park. For decades, since the 60s. The women's, this was the Carolina Foothills Garden Club, actually got 26 acres of this property, including this waterfall, designated as parkland, even though it had this ugly bridge right in the middle of it. Then in the 80s, they commissioned a master plan for the park, which sat on the shelf. Then in the 90s, the Mayor Knox White was elected, and he loved this idea of removing the bridge and developing this as a park. He could see that opportunity and wanted to get it done. But he knew that the park would need to be something truly special. So in the late 90s, he hired another landscape architect to do another master plan. And then in 2001, they had an election, and it brought in a new group of city council members. And finally, after over a decade, with the mayor's persistence and leadership through a local hospitality tax and other funding mechanisms, Greenville, South Carolina was able to raise $13 million for this project. They had about 50,000 people in their city at the time. And they were able to raise $13 million for this project. In 2002, that bridge came down. And the new plan for the park included this bold, iconic architectural feature, which is a 345-foot long cable suspension pedestrian bridge. Now, they didn't have to build this bridge as part of this park. I mean, they hired a Guatemalan architect out of Boston to design this thing. The bridge itself probably cost as much as the entire rest of the park development. But the mayor understood that this was more than about building a park or a bridge. This was about creating an identity for their city. And that's indeed what's happened today. I mean, this park and this bridge is on all of their marketing material. It is the city's identity now. And it gives people a reason to visit Greenville that never would have gone there before. just 2 years after that park was finished, on that initial $13 million investment, they saw $100 million in new private development in their downtown core. Again, they didn't have any forecasting models that told them that they were going to see that kind of development. It took a leap of faith. It took belief in a project like this. And it took leadership. So now we're going to look at the specific impacts that we have come up with for Roswell's river parks. And we're going to look at this in 3 different sections. First, we're going to talk about construction and operations. Then we'll go through visitor spending. And we'll end with local public revenues. So the construction, we've all seen this number, this $36 million price tag. That's the barrier to entry for this park. That's the bad news, essentially. It's just going to cost a lot of money to do this. And this budget estimate was done nearly 2 years ago now. But there's more to it than just the $36 million price tag if we look at the impacts from construction itself. Because there are very discrete, direct impacts associated with that process. If you drill down into those numbers, we know about $27 million of that is going to be direct, hard construction costs and labor and materials. And Blakely Group estimated that about 70% of those construction materials will be purchased locally, which is about $8.5 million into Roswell's economy during the construction period. Estimated almost 250 jobs created for construction, which would generate an annual payroll of anywhere from $10 to $15 million, and would generate about $1.2 million in additional sales tax from spending within the community by that construction workforce. Okay, so now we've talked about what it would cost to build the park. What will it cost to operate and maintain the park? This is a critical part of the equation that's often overlooked and just really mismanaged. If you're going to spend that kind of money on that type of project, you need to make sure that you have the resources to back it up. So in looking at operations and maintenance, we talked with city staff. We found out that current spending when this report was done was about $1,100 per acre per year on the parks. The river parks has about 60 acres, give or take, so that's about $66,000 a year at current spending levels. Based on the 2018 NRPA agency performance review, we know that the average spending across agencies across the country is about $6,500 per acre per year. So Roswell is considerably below that right now. And based on the vision that was laid out in the master plan and the expectations for this project, we took an aggressive assumption on expenditures for operations and maintenance for the report, and we assumed $10,000 an acre for operating and maintaining this park system. If you throw in the employment, we're looking at about 40 full-time equivalent jobs at about an average of $35,000 a year in salary. That's a total of $2 million a year in operations and maintenance expense. So one of the ways that we can combat that is through additional revenue streams. And this is something that we intentionally planned in the master planning document. But we looked at ways that we could incorporate events and activities that would make sense for this park system, but that would also generate potential revenue for the city. Things like the 4 river cafes that we had, an additional concert series, arts festival, expanded pavilion facilities, the community center, the bike share program. All those things are going to generate additional money within the park itself. The goal was to try to get this park to be a self-sustaining venture. So what does that look like financially? The left-hand side of this table here shows the existing park revenues as it stands currently. So from things like weddings and party rentals at River Landing, the rentals of the splash pads and the pavilions, you're looking at about $270,000 a year in revenue generated from the parks. If you throw in all the additional revenue streams that we just talked about and add in the additional visitation that we expect when the park's complete, the city's portion of that revenue is just over $1 million that we've estimated. That's a pretty good increase. But it still means that there's a significant shortfall in operations and maintenance. Almost $900,000 a year. That's a big number, but it's not something that would be unexpected for a project like this. And the way that most municipalities handle that is through establishing an endowment, which is simply a financial investment that's typically privately funded and that would be managed by a nonprofit conservancy. So if you look at it from a conservative standpoint, we're trying to make sure that the investment on that endowment would cover the shortfall in operations and maintenance. So we assumed a 5% return on that investment to cover the $900,000. You would need about $18 million in principal for that endowment. Again, that's a big number, but keep in mind that what we just talked about, that is in almost every case, I'm not sure of any cases that aren't this way, that is funded by private foundations, not by the city's pocketbook. So the second part of this is looking at visitor retail spending. And this is not spending within the park. That's accounted for in the operations numbers that we just talked about. The easiest way to think about this is if you think about somebody that's going to visit those parks, maybe it's somebody that's going to go down there to ride their bike, and maybe they need a bike helmet. They're not going to buy that helmet down at the parks. They're going to buy that at a local sporting goods store in Roswell. That's the kind of spending that we're talking about. Running shoes, clothes, snacks, all those sorts of things that would go along with visiting the park. So what the Blakely Group did, they looked at the total retail expenditures in Roswell for the year that we did this study. That was 2.3 billion. And then they pulled out 6 specific categories of retail spending that would be related to park users. Divide that by the number of residents in the city, divided by the number of days in the year, and you get this $11.10 average daily retail spending per resident. Well, how many residents do we have going to the parks? In 2017, based on the numbers that we got from the city, we were about 162,000 people a year going to the parks. For purposes of the study that we did, we assumed that the park would be completed in 2020. We had to pick a number. We know that's not the case, but making that assumption, with all the additional amenities that we had there and the expected growth, we're looking at about 277,000 people visiting the parks at completion. If you add in the inflation on that average daily spending number, you're at over $12 per visitor per day, which comes out to $3.4 million in retail spending throughout the community of Roswell. And then finally, the last piece that we look at is local public revenue, which includes the city's portion of the operations revenue that was generated within the parks, which is that roughly $1 million number. And then it also includes local sales tax. So we looked at the vendor revenues from all these new events and activities inside the park. That's about $4.2 million in revenue. Combined with the select retail spending that we just talked about, is $7.6 million total retail spending. Multiply that by your tax percentages, and you end up with about $190,000 in sales tax that the city collect on an annual basis, given all these assumptions. So looking at that collectively, what we're talking about is impact from construction. We've estimated about 250 jobs at an annual payroll of anywhere from $10 to $15 million, with sales tax from construction at $1.2 million. So that's for that discrete period of time that we'd be building the parks. From operations, you're looking at that $4.2 million in revenue from vendor operations, as well as 40 new jobs at $1.4 million in payroll. Visitor spending, we just talked about that, 277,000 visitors, $3.4 million in expenditures. And then finally, the local revenues, $1 million from revenue inside the park and another $190 from sales tax. multiply all that out over a 10-year period, and this is essentially the kind of take-home from this whole economic study that we just did. Sorry, wrong button. Which is this $90 million direct economic impact to the city of Roswell over that 10-year period. So that works out to a 2.5 times your return on investment for this project. And keep in mind that we were extremely aggressive on our anticipated expenditures for operations and maintenance, and we were very conservative on the revenues that we expect this park to generate. This analysis also can't account for new private economic development, like the case that we saw in Greenville, where they had $100 million of new development in their downtown. There's no forecasting model that we can use that can accurately and realistically tell us what that number would be. All we can do is look to those case studies as a previous example. And we could go on and on for days with similar case studies about similar projects. To kind of wrap up quickly, this is the work plan that we detailed in the impact study that we did. This sort of takes you through where we are today, what we would need to do in the initial stages of the project, before we can even get to the real design and engineering. And this is where I stress to keep in mind that this is not a typical park development project, because typically you wouldn't need to do all this other stuff up front. But with a project like this that we're talking about as an economic investment for the city, we need to take our time and do this the right way, or it's not going to succeed. And then finally, we were asked to recommend what a phase one would be if the project needed to be phased. We recommended it at the time, and we still recommend that Ace Sand would be the logical part of the project that would be a phase one, for a few different reasons. One, there's nothing there now. So this is the best opportunity to do something new and exciting on the river. Two, because there's nothing there now, all of the additional events and amenities that we would put on that site would be new revenue sources that could help against the operations and maintenance costs. And then finally, if the project is done right, this project has the best example to be a catalyst, to be the core of that project that would bring all the other phases along with it. That's the goal when you're doing a phase one, is you want to make sure that it's going to ensure that the rest of the phases of that project get completed. With that, I'm going to end. I'm going to turn this over to Walt, and then we'll answer some questions.
Hi, my name is Walt Ray. I'm the Chattahoochee Program Director for the Trust for Public Land. And I am honored to have the position of my job is to activate and preserve the Chattahoochee River and its valley from Helen, Georgia to Columbus, Georgia, which is luckily only 285 miles, so no problem, I got this. And we all know that one person and one organization is not going to do this alone, hence all the outreach that we do and all of the partners that we've engaged. I do have to tell you a little bit about PTPL. So we are a national nonprofit established in 1972. Our goal is land for people, and I like to say land for all people. And so we have spent 47 years buying about 3 million acres of land that has become public property. The Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area a lot of that was purchased by the Trust for Public Land. The East Side Trail and the Beltline and the park that you talked about, the historic Fourth Ward Park, TPL bought all of that before the city was in a position to be able to do so. But that's the kind of work we do. We're constantly adding to the national parks. The Yosemite and others, we add a couple hundred acres a year to those. So we are a national organization. We have 30 offices nationwide. I work in the Georgia office, which is in Midtown Atlanta. But we have 29 other offices across the country. And about 250, I think, staff nationwide, or maybe 300 staff nationwide. In Atlanta, in the Georgia office, we have the Chattahoochee River has been a major focus for the Trust for Public Land. The Chattahoochee River is why the Georgia office exists. We were opened about 25 years ago when we bought 18,000 acres of land along the Chattahoochee River, preserving about 80 miles of waterfront. A lot of it is where the Chattahoochee Nature Center and others, you're familiar with a lot of the projects that we've worked on. We also did, we published the Beltlines book. Ryan Gravel had a thesis that talked about transit loop. We hired Alex Garvin to take that idea with Ryan's and turn it into the Emerald Necklace idea, the Emerald Corridor idea, which became the Beltline. And then we bought the entire East Side Trail, and again, before the city was able to do it. So we laid the foundations for that. We also bought and established the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site. We had legislation on the books for that to become a National Historic Site. The federal government wasn't moving at all. Developers were circling the houses in the neighborhood, ready to tear them down and redevelop that area. And our board members flew in from all over the country, went to the courthouse steps, bought those out from underneath the developers with personal checks, and donated them to the government, forcing the government to develop that area. And they were not very happy with us, but it is now one of the most visited National Historic Sites in the country. And they were not happy with us because they had nothing in place to now we have a National Historic Site and no staff. So, and we hung up a sign. They threw it in the dumpster. It now hangs on our wall in our office, right next to my office. I see it every day. But land for people. We want to get people on the land. We're not necessarily a conservation organization. We're about conserving land for human interaction. We're happy if groundhog tortoises want to live there, but that's not really our goal. So the Chattahoochee River has been a main focus, like I said. My job is 285 miles, but how do you take the first bite of that? No one can really think about 285 miles all at once, so we are timid. We went after 100 miles. So we looked at what I call the metropolitan middle, which is this the pointer? Oh, there it is. 100 mile, the metropolitan middle. So Beaufort Dam, which holds back Lake Lanier, Roswell, Atlanta, Cobb, Chattahoochee Bend State Park. 100 mile, the metropolitan middle. We started to look at as where do we focus our first efforts in terms of activating the river and protecting it. And we wanted to, our board got together. We wanted to drive engagement. We want a diverse group of people to be able to enjoy this river. We want to create an inclusive and inviting public realm, one that invites all people from all backgrounds and all interests to use the river and to enjoy it and elevate the recognition. The Chattahoochee River has a PR problem. We say this too often, not in Roswell, but in the rest of the state and the region, certainly. You say the word Chattahoochee and people will wrinkle up their nose, like, ooh, the Chattahoochee, right? Or there'll be the Chattahoochee. Is that I've heard of it. Is it in Georgia? It's in Georgia, isn't it? And I know as Roswellians, we find that very, very hard to believe. But, people from the region have a hard time finding the river. And honestly, because we've done a great job of hiding it. We've hidden it behind industrial uses. We've hidden it behind neighborhoods, behind shopping centers, behind. So kind of from Peachtree Creek, I-75 upstream, it's kind of easy to find the river. But you get Atlanta south, it's a chore to find the river. So people should not wrinkle up their noses when they hear the word Chattahoochee. People should think of it as a wonderful destination where people do want to live, work, and play. And that is one of our aspirational goals. But how do we get there? So we have a 100-mile stretch. We want to develop a wonderful public realm along the Chattahoochee. So the first thing that I did about a year ago, actually, April is our 1-year anniversary, we convened what we call the Chattahoochee Working Group. That is a member of stakeholders who care about the river, who see it as part of its mission. So nonprofit organizations like Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, Chattahoochee Now, Chattahoochee Parks Conservancy, TPL, others who see the river as a corridor and as part of their mission. The governments along along the river, both the counties, there are 7 counties in this first study area, and more than 12 cities. I always lose track of how many cities, but Roswell obviously is the main one, and we've had great representation on the Chattahoochee Working Group from Deborah and Jeff, and Chattahoochee Nature Center and others in the area. But open up a dialogue. You know, the first meeting, 12 people showed up. I was thrilled, like, yay, someone came. Last month we had 54 organizations in the room, and standing room only. And it was hot in there, and we needed a bigger room. So this is a good problem to have. We were getting people talking about the river. So the governments and nonprofit organizations, and these are the fourth Wednesdays, and you guys are well represented there. But at the end of the day, the dream is to create a public realm, a fully functional, seamless public realm along the Chattahoochee that entices a diverse population to want to live, work, and play along its length. And Roswell is the sample. I mean, when I have to show somebody, like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, what is a public realm along the Chattahoochee? I'm like, oh, let's go to Roswell. And I bring them to Roswell, and we walk the river walk. We walk the parks. I take people kayaking if they're willing to get in the water. I'll go to your, what is the vendor? Shoot the Hooch. We'll get our kayaks, canoes. We'll drive up to Island Ford, get dropped off, and end at Azalea Park. People love that. They can't get enough of it. And so then I take them to the Atlanta section, and I'm like, when we're in a sewer line, and there's woods and mud and nothing, and crickets and some kudzu and some privet. And I said, can you picture what Roswell has done here? And they're like, yes, I can. So you guys have set the bar. You've set it pretty high. But I do use you as examples, so forgive me. I take no credit for what you've done, but I certainly take joy in showing off what the city has done. And the plan that you guys have is amazing, and certainly fits that. So if we talk about a public realm along the Chattahoochee, this is going to be obviously national parks, city parks, county parks, Georgia Power, utility lines, sewer lines, working farms. It's going to be a very diverse collections of land that we stitch together into a wonderful tapestry that offers a wonderful, diverse of experiences, 400 miles. So if you have this tapestry that is all these different owners and all these different interests, what do you call the thing, the common thing? What is this tapestry called? So the very first thing that the Chattahoochee Working Group did was develop a brand. We call it Chattahoochee Riverlands, and the tagline is Nature Connected. And again, Roswell has done a wonderful job setting the bar of this, and we did show people Roswell when we were talking about like what a Chattahoochee Riverlands is before we knew what Chattahoochee Riverlands is called. We can also call it the Riverlands for short, but so Roswell is right in the middle of the Chattahoochee Riverlands. You know, south of Atlanta, we have these farms, we have woods, we have beautiful meadows. You know, in Atlanta and Cobb, we have a lot of industrial areas with 400 to 600 feet of width of riverfront. Kind of behind those, where all the pipes are the broken pipes, sort of, and at the water's edge, and drain the highways around it. But in this area, we have the mosaic of the residential areas, the state parks. The national parks. Gwinnette's got some great parks on the river. Roswell obviously has great parks on the river. But when you start to sew all that together, you become a Chattahoochee Riverlands. And like I said, you guys have built some great precedents that we can follow. So this 100 miles, we have an idea. We have people like you guys leading the way, showing us where we're going. How do we get there? Like, what is a public realm on the Chattahoochee River? And so we came up with a $1.5 million planning budget through the Atlanta Regional Commission, TPL, City of Atlanta, and Cobb County to develop what this idea would be. In October, we hired Scape, which is a internationally renowned firm. It was owned by Kate Orff, who was last year's MacArthur Genius Grant winner. Very small boutique firm. And they are very curious and very hungry and very... they love to investigate, and they love to understand how things all fit together and how the ecology works with the cultural resources. They've identified 998, so I'm not going to say 1,000, but nearly 1,000 historic resources along the river that are there, left over from the Native Americans through the Civil War and the civil rights and the mills and the factories, and there are a lot of these in Roswell, and we're all well aware of this. So this team is working very hard to figure out what this public realm would be along the Chattahoochee, where they work with the Chattahoochee Working Group, which I said is now up to over 50 organizations. And we've also broken this 100-mile stretch, which is a little bit onerous to think about. The week before last, we kicked off sub-area committees. And we hosted, actually you hosted, The city of Roswell hosted the first ever sub-area committee for this at the River Landing in Roswell. And thank you for that. And so the community is starting to have dialogues, and actually a lot of what you have in your river parks plan is, you know what we hear a lot? People want to go kayaking, they want to go canoe, they want to bicycle up and down the river, they want to walk their dogs, stuff like that. But in all three sub-areas, the rural one, the industrial one, and the one that we're in now, people want to have a cup of coffee by the river. They want to sit there and enjoy a good meal. Right now, there are 3 spots along the entire corridor to do that. There's canoe, Ray's on the river. My last name is Ray. It's not my restaurant, sadly. And then that little coffee shop right by Ray's. It's behind Chattahoochee Coffee. If you can find it, it's a great cup of coffee, and you can look over the river. 3 spots in 100 miles. You can do that. So your plan, I think, will resonate well. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for the kinds of things that you guys are talking about. And I hope Roswell doesn't take all of it before we all get there. But you guys are two decades ahead, so you've got a good running start. So the planning process, I don't know how much you want to get in the planning process, but it's 18-month study. We're 6 months in, so this time next year we will have a big, wonderful vision that shows whatever a seamless, fully functional public roam along the Chattahoochee is, and obviously Roswell plays a big part in that. And we will be keeping you in the loop, and you have great representation, a seat at the table. Does that everyone here?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lawyers?
Well, we've been talking about this plan for a while, and I think that I've been a big cheerleader, but also we've really taken the time to develop the master plan, go out to the community, get input from the community, and of course they're excited about it. But I want to thank, I'm sorry that Matt had to leave, because I want to thank him for encouraging the Rec Commission to go further and request the economic impact analysis, because I think that was a piece that was missing in our master plan. Michael has done a great job in the master plan and in the analysis. Thank you so much. Thank you, Walt, for coming and spending time with us. People are looking at the river. We've got it. We'd like to continue this process, and the next step would be to ask for some funding in this budget, FY20 budget, for design of ACE sand. The design would include the facility footprint, the layout, floor plans, activities, day and evening activities in that rental facility. It would include drawings and graphics. We're also asking for additional money for some marketing, because it's a big dollar amount that we're looking at for parks, and clearly our citizens can't pay for all of that. So we're going to have to find partners. And in order to do that, we've got to have a little bit of design done, and we need some marketing money. We need a flyover, we need a model, because we don't have anything right now to take to foundations and companies to ask for support. The interest in the Chattahoochee is very strong. We are in a perfect position because we've done so much, the city council, the mayor and city councils, and you all continue to help us and support us over the years for the river. And we have so much now. It's just a great opportunity to continue this. We understand, the Rec Commission understands that we're going to have to find some partners. We can't expect our taxpayers to pay for all this, and in order to do that, we'd like to continue on with the design of ACE and the marketing money. We decided on ACE, thought that was the most important part to start on, because that's the area of the river that's going to bring us the revenue back. If we build this river plan, we build the river park, they will come. There's no question about it. We have issues to work out with parking, but the idea is to keep our visitors in Roswell, spending money in Roswell, getting them up to Canton Street, getting them to the east side, going to our hotels and our restaurants and our stores. Just think that based on the economic impact, based on the planning we've done, it's a wonderful thing for Roswell.
I'll just add, what you'll see in our budget recommendations are coming forward is this section right in here in task 3 and task 4, this design concept associated directly with ASAN, and then the marketing and branding for the entire river park system. And so what we want to be able to do is not only start the conceptual design for that ASAN property, but then also have the marketing materials, have the branding materials, so that as we're out in the community and out looking for our partners, we have a clear vision that is consistent across all of our parks, all of our facilities with those materials, so that we have something to truly, tangibly talk about, to be able to show people, here's our vision for that 3D flyover of the facility. Here's what you can expect to see as you come to the next version of our river parks in the city of Roswell. And so that will be included as part of our budget recommendations that we can talk about when the time's appropriate during your budget deliberation. That's all we have.
Okay, any other questions, Jeff? We are adjourned.